I think it's very difficult for the idea of urban futures to do so. First of all, because the idea of future is already imbued with normativity, and it's about how we ought to act in order to realize what should be. In this sense, probably there is something quite reactionary in the idea of urban future. But of course, it's not necessarily all there is. So thinking about, more specifically, about what this meaning connection between urban and technology, it's very important maybe to, first of all, disarticulate the idea of technology from a separation with the urban as a place, as a space, as a relation, and the idea of the urban in a temporality, which is linear. That is a progressive temporality that goes from the present to a future, which then is supposed to be hopeful, or in a pessimistic jargon is supposed to be bad or apocalyptic in these times of climate change, for instance. So, I mean, technology cannot be separated from the spatial temporality of the urban, if only because it's profoundly urban, as in the same way as the urban is profoundly technological. The beginning of the urban era, urban age, or the beginning of urbanization as we know it today, and the beginning of the metropolis as the form of contemporary capitalist industrialization is tied exactly to the Industrial Revolution, and thus to a specific technological and scientific innovation. So it's profoundly technological. So since from the beginning it's almost pointless or can be wrong in itself to pretend to disarticulate and ask what technology can do for the urban, just because there is no urban without technology. So technology is already doing for the urban. And so if one wants to, in a way, frame this question from the point of view of the classic approach to technology, the Heideggerian question concerning technology, without having necessarily to go to the pessimistic consequences or interpretation, one could ask the question about technology vis-a-vis the urban is not really the question of what the urban can do with technology, but what technology tells us about the urban and about the specific relation that we define as urban. Once we discussing this question, maybe we can begin to disarticulate this relation and go back maybe to what Marx used to say about technology, the hope of technology. Marx, maybe in his most hopeful and optimistic passages, he was saying technology is a hope for overcoming the problem of course, the problem of capitalism, the inequality of capitalism. As long as technology is separated, is disengaged from the capitalistic model, which is to say, any technological innovation, any technological advancement, unavoidably is emerges in a capitalist context, because this is where we live. So, in order to see the potential of technology, we can never ask, or we can never see this potential from the point of view of a technology as separated from a specific capitalistic and urban capitalistic apparatus, but rather we should reflect on how can we think about a technology that is not tied to this. How can we think about a technology which is separated, as somehow disarticulated from this tangle, which of course doesn't mean to arrive at a neutrality of technology, but right, think about technology in a different articulation, which goes back maybe to your original question, how to think about technology in a non-normative sense. I don't think it's possible to really think about technology in a non-normative sense, but probably it's possible to think about technology in a different normativity from the one in which we are. So, and for this to happen, it's unavoidable to think about technology in connection with other social, cultural, and legal apparatuses, because again, it cannot be separated from them. And this is probably the problem that happened today in most of debates, at least the debates about technology, which are proliferating. So debates about technology usually separate in two kind of patterns, simplifying. And one is debates which happen in a more technological field. I'm talking about people working in, for instance, in startups, but I'm not talking necessarily about, I'm talking about also people that are interdisciplinary, intersecting these areas with sociology, with critical connection, with critical thinking. And one problem is that these debates think about technology and what technology can do, disarticulating it from the question of capitalism. And just to make a brief example, I was at a debate last week here in Lisbon, and there was Martin Ford, which he wrote a lot of books on the topic, and he was making this presentation. And this presentation was interesting, but the question of capitalism never came up. And this was interesting because technology was put against many different problems. But the main problem, the fact that the way in which we use technology to solve this problem is always a way which is completely shaped by its capitalist origin, was never dealt with. The other kind of debates which happen often in the academia see technology in a very pessimistic way, and they are either explicitly or implicitly either aware or unaware. All the sons of the Heideggerian critique of technology is seen as a somehow extremely dangerous and dooming, and every technological advancement is seen by default in a critical sense. So now, of course, we cannot go too much into that because we don't have time to do so. But the question is how to go beyond this separation, how to think technology outside of a naive not simply naive optimism, but outside of a naivety which sees technology as somehow separated from the troubles, in the specific sense with urban troubles, and a perspective that sees technology as a kind of preventive critique. And maybe we can find some insight from, for instance, the work of some more heterodox thinkers like Walter Benjamin, which thinking about technology in the age of late 19th and early 20th century, which was the age in which, first of all, there was this tighter connection between technology and the urban, the merging of this, the birth of this connection, and capitalism. And it was also an age, especially the late 19th century, the Belle Epoque, of incredible optimism in the power and the possibility of technological progress. Walter Benjamin did not stop at a classic Marxist, if you want, critique, but he wanted to explore the way in which technology was intersected with hope, and he was using the term the wish image and the collective dreams of the society, and the way in which these dreams of the society were intersected with technology. And in a way, he was saying the possibility for the dreams of society not to become fetish and be fetishized like technology, to be fetishized as a mere instrument of progress, was exactly to have done with this idea of progress as a linear, and start to explore this connection between the dreams or the utopia or the hopes of a society and the technological possibility outside of this tangle. His strategy was to do so through the material artifact of the society, to try to explore how the aesthetic expression of society, so not just the, if you want, the ideological structures of the society, but how this expression which were materialized in the urban life, in the urban everyday life, how in this expression we could find both the limits and the potential to disentangle these wish images, these hopeful utopian images, from this dangerous idea of progress and projection. So probably this is the question. This is to come back to the original question. This will be the question: how can we disarticulate the specific technological artifacts and possibility and potential of our society, which goes all the way from the promise of smart city to the promise of artificial intelligence? How not to look at them with naive optimism or the preemptive pessimism of critique? How to explore their potential by disarticulating the hopeful potential that they harbor from the problematic and fetishistic idea of progress, which, of course, as we know very well, has been profoundly hijacked in ideas of innovation, creativity, smart city. All these ideas which now characterize the way in which urban development is articulated through this idea of revitalization, regeneration, and renovation. And of course, if you see, as you can see, exactly in this idea is hidden the very ideology of progress as a linear projection, and the idea of crisis as not a specific and material condition which should be dealt with and approached in its material and contingent existence, but rather as a lens that justifies preemptively what is done in order to overcome it. So to make a basic example, it's very simple to see how the very idea of regeneration is already imbued with this idea, because it presupposes a void that must be regenerated. It presupposes a passage from a present which is somehow lacking. It can be the lack of talent, of creativity, the lack of security in ideas of stigmatization, and the lack of development in the idea of rundown and deprived neighborhood or areas. All this idea posit a void, a present void, and a future which is, of course, hopeful, and the best representation is on the so-called artistic vision of this development project, and this direction of hope, which is always a very uncompromising, well, not uncompromising, uncontroversial and non-conflictual line of progress, is always presupposed as in a way which bypasses the contingency and the conflict existent in the present. So probably to conclude, the idea would be to do the same thing that I was saying, the same strategy that I was talking about before in the context of technology, to do that with the notion of future and the notion of hope. To discuss hope not as a kind of disembodied vector which somehow permit us to transcend the present towards a future, but rather as a kind of material force which acts already in the present, which is already present in the materiality of everyday life in the city and the materiality of the visible and invisible structures that shape the urban, and only ways to be rescued, deactivated, liberated from the apparatus that control it, that hijack it, if you want, parasitically. And in this sense, to liberate hope in this sense means also to liberate technology and to repurpose technology for a future which, of course, we would not be able to decide in advance whether it's hopeful or not, exactly because it's a future to be built and is not a kind of transcendent target which is posited from a utopian, idealized present.